Ask yourself this question every time somebody's breaking down a deal. Where does a deal start? A deal always starts with a motivated seller. A seller that is going through something, and I could list out all of the things. In fact, I should probably make a YouTube video just dedicated to all the reasons a seller sells a property. There are thousands of reasons, and I've never seen an identical one in all of the 7,000 transactions I've ever done. Never once. This seller, his name is Bob. The reason Bob was in the process of selling this property is because he built another property about 40 miles away. This other property that Bob built, he built it as a spec. He speculated and he built a home that he thought was cool that the market would love to buy once he was done building. The challenge is he built this property and the market softened and the interest rates went up. Therefore, his buyers started leaving the marketplace. What Bob said was, I need to move out of the house on Kaufman. I need to refinance the interest rate that I'm stuck with because I'm in the middle of a construction loan, which are very high interest rates. The only way to refinance out of a construction loan is to actually live in the property. So Bob moved into the new property and left this property vacant. Bob now saying, all right, I need to fix up the property. I need to finish the barn. I need to do a bunch of things to the landscape. I need to put it on the market. I need to see if this house will sell in order for me to go get a loan on my new house. He's hemorrhaging money here, so there's pain here. Why would somebody sell or finance such a house to you for $1 down? I'm telling you right now. He also had just built this house. This house was built in 2022. It's brand new, but it was also unfinished. Unfinished meaning it's habitable, but the barn wasn't done and other little minor improvements were in the middle of being constructed. Bob says, I don't have the time, the energy, I need to get into this house as fast as possible. Also, Bob built this house for $2 million, and in his mind, he had a very specific number he wanted to sell in the market, $3.7 million. In Bob's mind, he is married to a number. So a lot of times I tell people creative finance comes down to pain and gain. The seller here had both. He had pain in one house and the desire for gain in the other. If Bob put this house on the market in a traditional sense, number one, he probably would not have found a buyer at $3.7 million. Number two, that buyer would have come along and said, I want you to finish everything. I want it freshly painted. I want everything done. However, I come to Bob, I see the house is vacant, I see that there's some situation going on, and I say, Bob, I want to buy this property with seller finance or creative finance. Bob says, what is creative finance? Creative finance is where I take over your existing mortgage and whatever equity you have in the house, I will also make a payment to you for that. I pay that to you for a number of years. It helps you avoid taxes and I get you the number you want, but you give me the terms that I need. Remember this, Bob is getting the number he wants and Pace, the buyer, is getting the terms he needs. I did not argue on the price. I didn't even verify whether the house was worth $3.7 million or not. I looked at a couple of things. I said, what can I do with the property? Value of a property is determined by the buyer, yes, but really the value of a house is what you can do with it. Bob says to me, Pace, I want $800,000 down, and I will then let you seller finance the remaining $2.9 million. I said, Bob, I understand tax situations. You just built this house in 2022. You are bound to make $1.7 million in profit on this house. And if you make $1.7 million and you take a deposit of 800 grand from me, $400,000 of that is going to go directly to who? Uncle Sam! So why would I give you an $800,000 down payment when $400,000 of it will never reach your pocket? Why don't we do a deal where I give you $0 down? And this works for most sellers because they understand they don't want to pay taxes. Most sellers in a seller finance situation are different than sellers in a subject to situation. Subject to is all about pain. Seller finance is primarily about gain, and it's a savvy seller that understands tax implications. Bob says, you're right, I don't want to pay $400,000 in taxes. I'm okay with a $0 down deal. So how did we get to $1 down? Well, Bob ran this transaction by his attorney. His attorney says it's illegal to do $0 down. Obviously, that attorney is incorrect. Got his attorney educated. His attorney says, I'm still not okay with $0 down. My reply via email was, would you be okay with $1 down? His attorney says, we would be just fine with that. You know what's funny is I actually never gave Bob the $1 down. I technically have a $0 down deal. I don't even know how I would have gotten the $1 to Bob because a wire transfer for $1 would have cost me $25. I'm gonna break down this deal and show you how Bob will make way more money than $3.7 million on this transaction because this is the greatest investment he could ever make. All right, so let's talk about what terms are. For people that hear the word terms all the time, it's number one, purchase price. Okay, purchase price is the first thing you have to determine. The second part of terms is the down payment. Number three is my interest rate. Okay, and number four, finally, is the length of time. Here are the terms of this deal. The purchase price is $3.7 million. Here's how this deal worked. The seller has a $2 million mortgage on the property at 4% interest that I bought subject to. So this is technically what I would call a hybrid. It's part subject to and part seller finance. The seller has $1.7 million in equity, which I am giving the seller 4% interest. This portion is seller finance. This portion is subject to because it's an existing debt with another bank. So I'm making technically one payment that gets split up to two different parties. Part of it goes to Bob, the other part of it goes to the bank. I'm giving Bob 4% interest on $1.7 million. And while you might say, well, Bob could get a lot more money somewhere else. You're right. But guess what would happen with Bob? If Bob sold this house right now and took the $1.7 million in cash, half of that money would go where? It would go to the IRS. But because of the way that I structure my deals, over a 10-year time frame, the seller will avoid all of their capital gains tax. Therefore, the seller did gain $850,000 by avoiding paying it to the IRS by selling it to me. And so there's 850,000 reasons why the seller should not sell the house in traditional real estate and should sell it to me on seller finance, because immediately on day one, they made $850,000. And on top of that, I'm giving them 4% interest on the total $1.7 million. This seller is greatly benefited by not selling it on traditional finance. They didn't have to clean up the property. We didn't have to go through appraisals. We didn't have to go through a bank. We didn't have to wait. We could literally close in a 2-day time frame. We closed at a company called Creative Title and Escrow, which is a title and escrow company that focuses on creative finance and these types of transactions. I used a top-tier TC, top-tier transaction coordinators, and they structured all the paperwork and made sure everything was easy. I want you to remember this, it's very important. The seller only gets taxed on money they receive. So if the seller only receives $1 at close of escrow, then this year in 2024, he will only have to pay taxes on that $1 rather than the full $1.7 million. We will then spread the $1.7 million over the course of 10 years or even longer. Therefore, the seller will be able to mitigate and reduce his capital gains tax, meanwhile making an interest rate on the seller finance equity. The interest rate, again, is 4%. We talked about that up there earlier. My payment on this deal, by the way that we structured it with purchase price, interest, etc., all combined, is $17,000. And we are going to break down in the next segment how I'm going to make money from this property rather than have it hemorrhage $17,000 every single month. Length of time. In a traditional subject to deal, I'm typically going full 30 years and I'm just making the payments all the way through the whole entire term of that underlying payment. In this deal, Bob really wanted a 10-year term. He said, Pace, I really want to be done with this in 10 years, so I want to put a limit on my $1.7 million. If you want to keep the $2 million loan with the bank for the next 30 years, I'm okay with that, but my equity needs to be paid back in 10 years. So what I plan on doing in this situation is either A, paying him off in cash, right? Maybe I flip some houses or I wholesale some houses and I pay down his equity over 10 years. Or B, in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, let's say interest rates go back down to 4%. I could just refinance this entire transaction, wipe out all his equity and wipe out the underlying mortgage and put it all in my name. So length of time is 10 years. Most people looking at this deal are gonna say, $17,000, are you kidding me? I don't even make that per month. How could I afford a house like that? Well, you could afford a house like that. And let me show you exactly how I'm going to afford this house, even though the payment is $17,000. During the calendar year, we will only be in Montana from May all the way through September, about 4.5 months, which gives me the ability to rent this property out for 7.5 months. We hired a company that manages weddings and will also manage other types of events. We're gonna be doing weddings at the property. We're going to be doing masterminds. We're going to be doing men's retreats. So imagine having a property like this that can sleep 20 people. I can have marriage retreats. In fact, one of our marriage retreats we are going to be doing is coming up. We talked to the venue, the company that's going to be managing these for us, and they said that they will average about $13,000 per week renting this property out. All right, so let's do the math here. If I can rent this property for 7.5 months out of the year, and those 7.5 months, you multiply that by 4 weeks per average, multiply that 30 by 13,000, this property will generate $390,000 in a year. Okay, cool. So $390,000 divided by 12, that means this property will bring in an average of $32,000 a month. I have the payment for $17,000. Plus I have another $10,000 in miscellaneous expenses, and I'm also going to be hiring a full-time employee here for about $6,000 per month. So this property will cost me about $32,000 to $33,000 a month. I'll have a full-time person working on the maintenance, handling the property, cleaning the property, doing everything full-time. This will be their full-time job, working on this massive property, mowing the lawn, trimming the hedges, dealing with the animals, working in the garden, preventing bad things from happening, fixing things the day of instead of us having to call a maintenance person. And so essentially, the $390,000 a year that I will bring in for the venue will allow me to have a property paid for by other businesses that I can take up in the summertime as my Montana retreat. Now, could I have just used this as my personal residence and not turn it into an event center? Of course, but that's not what I want to do. I want to be an investor and I want to house hack everything that I'm doing. So this property will make money or at least break even on a deal, only $1 out of my pocket.